I want to start off today's video with a little bit of an explanation and what goes into the process of making a typical video for this channel. Now normally, and again, this isn't all the time, but normally, I find a topic that I find interesting, I come here, set up my lights, set up my camera, set up my microphone, sit down in this chair, make word goop come out of my face for what I think will be around 10 minutes, and then I edit it together to make myself coherent, and then I post it, upload it, and expect unanimous approval from the people in the audience and in the comments. And then I move on to the next topic. However, there is a different process for different topics depending on circumstances. And this is what happens when I look at a story and I find it interesting and I know what I'm going to say about it, just about, but I feel like the story is not yet done. It might be 75% of the way there, maybe 90% of the way there, but it's not 100% complete, so I'm just not ready to talk about it. Well, this video, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, is one of those days. Because today we're going to talk about the complete and utter breakdown of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur specifically, and how the company, in my opinion, is on the verge of going under, and we can see that in the day-to-day operations of the company, including their constant fundraisers. So I don't know where to put this in the video, but I recently started a Discord, links in the description. If you support me via Patreon, subscribe store, or the join button, then you'll get a special rank in that Discord, but let's get back to the video. The years have not been kind to Cenk Uygur, especially as of late. This is a man who clearly never expected Donald J. Trump to win the presidency in the United States of America, and despite what he tells you about how he always saw Trump coming, he is in fact on record months before the election and in the direct lead up to the election saying that Hillary Clinton is definitely going to win the election and Trump can't win because he's the king of clowns and he's never won anything in his life.
That Donald Trump can't win. And then I'm also in that compilation, but I never say he can't win because I don't believe that, as you're going to see. In the beginning, I had no idea Trump was going to do this well. You can see Freak 16 and you can see what I thought back then, and I said on the record I didn't think he had a chance, yada yada. And then, but as soon as he took the lead, I was certainly among the first to say, no, he's going to hold the lead. Now that's abundantly clear, and on the record, you go back on the tapes. As Trump is running wild with the fields, I think in the end, that flame will, after a long burn, will finally flame out.
In fact, Cenk did an entire segment on his channel in the lead up to the 2016 election called #LoserDonald, because Cenk Uygur thought that if he did these videos basically every day, if not every day, every other day, that would put it out there in the narrative that Donald Trump is a loser. And this led and came into culmination when Trump actually won the election and Cenk had to put out the video, "Loser Donald won the election," which had to be unbelievably embarrassing for him. And since that time, Cenk has been breaking down over the years. He's shown his anger. He's shown his unsympathetic side to people he disagrees with. He's shown his ability to lie and misconstrue information in order to attack the president more and more. And as these features, these negative characteristics associated with Cenk that a lot of us knew were there the whole time, bubbled up to the surface, he's been shedding audience. And as he's moved more woke and tried to appeal to a younger audience, his company has been losing money. Now, they're not losing money on all fronts. They have secured a bunch of investors. They got a big investment from the Katzenberg Group. I forgot what the group is actually called, but Jeffrey Katzenberg, the former CEO of Disney and DreamWorks, is the head guy at that group. So there is money being pumped into the company, but ad revenues have been down across the board, especially in digital media, which is why we see a lot of digital media, specifically left-wing media, engaging in layoffs. And remember, the $20 million or $25 million that Cenk Uygur received from the Katzenberg Group was not a donation to their company, it was an investment, and these are people who are expecting a return on that investment. This is why shortly after receiving that investment from the Katzenberg Group, after Cenk expanded the staff by nearly double, he had to announce that he was laying off long-term members of the TYT staff and shutting down channels that were associated with those members. And then he followed that up by asking his audience for more money. So he cut his staff in half, he got rid of some of the classic shows on the TYT network, but he still needed more money because cutting costs wasn't going to cut it for Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks. And that's not the only time the Young Turks in recent memory has resorted to asking their audience for money. And for longtime viewers of the Young Turks, you know that this is something that they used to do from time to time in the past. When they needed a new studio, they decided to raise money from their audience in order to build their new studio. But while the fundraisers used to be maybe one or two every 2 to 5 years, now the fundraisers are almost constant. Every single month, Cenk Uygur is coming up with a new number at his domain, tyt.com/go, that he needs his audience to contribute in order for them to stay afloat. Now, if you recall, Cenk's embarrassing loss in the California 25 primary, a primary where he got 5% of the vote despite raising over $1 million, a primary where he finished in 4th despite calling himself repeatedly the front runner in the primary, happened in early March. In fact, it was Super Tuesday, so it was a double whammy for Cenk because that was the same day that Bernie Sanders' campaign and his hopes and dreams got wiped out, and it was also the same day that Cenk had to face the world having only got 5% of the vote.
We've been around 18 years, and we made it, at least adulthood for now. And from time to time, we ask you guys for a little bit of help to stay in business, honestly. And we're trying to raise $200,000 a month for the rest of the year to get to $2 million drive.
Now, Cenk followed that loss by saying that even including March, his company needed $200,000 a month every month until the end of the year in order to stay open, which means $2 million. And if you need to raise $2 million in extra funding in order to keep your company open, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say that they are in significant financial trouble.
Every once in a while, we need you guys, and this is one of those times. So we're gonna try to do one step at a time here. We're asking you to go to tyt.com/go. Every once in a while, we'll show you the thermometer to see how it's going. I'd love to raise $200 a month through the end of the year so we can get 2 million so we make things happen. Look, guys, I'm gonna keep it super real with you guys. I don't know if you know this, but Francis Maxwell, Hassan Piker, Brooke Thomas, they're some of our best hosts ever, and they're not here. Ken Klippenstein, we loved him as a reporter. You guys helped us hire him. Somebody outbid us.
However, even though that fundraiser was kicked off in March for the 200K, every month until the end of the year, the Young Turks has yet again launched 2 other fundraising drives. Now, if you're interested in learning more about how prevalent fundraisers have become in the recent history of the Young Turks, then I'm definitely going to recommend a channel for you called Dame Pesos. You guys might remember him as the guy who put together the 2016 election compilation, but he has a bunch more compilations on the Young Turks, and he specifically highlights their constant asking their audience for money in a lot of his more recent videos. So definitely check it out. I know a lot of you have already recommended him to me. That's how I found him. But I'm going to recommend him to the rest of you because the guy's like the king of compilations when it comes to the Young Turks. But I'm going to set aside those fundraisers for the rest of this video and focus on his 2 most recent fundraisers. Because yes, even though this guy is raising $200K a month every month until the end of the year, he recently just launched 2 additional fundraisers. The first is related to his upcoming book, and the second is related to Cenk's 5-year plan.
My whole life, people have been telling me to do one thing, and they keep saying this, especially since I've been on the Young Turks. Every friend I have, every family member, and a lot of you guys. Will you, for God's sake, do this thing, Cenk? What is it? Write a book. Fine, you win. The name of the book is Justice is Coming. You can start pre-ordering on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other outlets. Eventually, obviously, we'll have it on at our shop as well. And by the way, the pre-orders make a big difference because then based on that, Amazon and the others will order more books.
Now you might be saying, Sean, you're being a little bit disingenuous. It is not a fundraiser when you ask people to pre-order your book. A lot of authors, in fact, maybe all authors, ask their audience or whoever they want to buy their book to pre-order their book. But here's the thing. Most of the time when authors do it, especially first-time authors like Cenk Uygur, there's actually a book to pre-order. And as Cenk said in his book announcement where you can already give him money for this book, it doesn't exist yet. He's written some chapters, but he's still working on it now, but he's also asking you for money for this non-existent book right this second.
So here, I got a hard copy with me here too. Is it already written? Nope.
Some of it is written, but I'm working on the rest.
No, you are not imagining this. That is legitimately Cenk Uygur on the Young Turks telling his audience to pre-order a book when all he really has is a book cover. And what makes this worse is that if you go into the Young Turks video backlog, not more than a week before Cenk made the announcement that you can buy this book cover for a book that might exist in the future, you can find videos of them ragging on Dave Rubin and the book reviews for his book. But the thing is, at least Dave Rubin actually wrote a book before he started selling it. And what makes this even worse, even more embarrassing for Cenk, even more cringe, is the way he tries to sell this to his audience. Because again, it needs to be said, this man does not have a book. He has a book cover. He says it's not even complete yet. He basically implies that if you order this book, then that will help the progressive movement. If you line Cenk Uygur's pockets, then all of a sudden, all these book companies that never give deals to progressives will start giving deals to progressives, and then the progressive revolution will take off.
If a progressive book goes to #1 in the New York Times bestseller list, and yes, that is definitely possible, and you guys can make that a reality, guess what? Then all the publishers are going to want to have 100 progressive books. Folks in media don't believe it until they can see it with their own eyes. So that's why other progressive books doing well has led us to a point where we're in a position where we could go to #1. And if we go to #1, I swear to God, there'll be 10, there'll be 20, there'll be 100 more books just like this. And that helps to further get the message out. And so we have a platform, and you guys are with us, and we could make it go to #1 and then unleash that. Right now, there's so many stereotypes in the mainstream media about how right-wing does better in media. It is preposterous, and we could prove how preposterous it is. So if you can, pre-order one today online.
Cenk, you're not the first person on the far left to write a book. You know who's a best-selling author? Senator Bernie Sanders. In fact, that's why Bernie Sanders is a millionaire, because after his 2016 campaign, he wrote a book and a bunch of people went out and bought it. There's clearly a market for progressive authors, and there's many progressive authors on the New York Times bestseller list. So what are you even talking about? You're trying to play up the fact that you're a progressive and that progressives are oppressed in order to sell more books. Just be honest about that. You want money. You don't want a book that flops. And you're probably not going to get one because your audience are suckers and they'll give you money for everything and they'll buy your book even though it's the same regressive nonsense that you say on your show.
And I'm going to prove that the country's already progressive. I've already written that chapter. You're going to love that chapter. It is indisputable proof.
One of the only chapters that Cenk has actually written thus far in this book that he's selling is a chapter on how Americans, in actuality, despite what you might have been told by the mainstream media, are actually ultra progressive and they'll love the progressive agenda. And you know for a fact that this is going to have the same misleading data that Cenk puts in his videos, that Kyle puts in his videos, that you see online, and I've debunked multiple times on this channel.
That the overwhelming majority of Americans are already progressive, they just don't know it. Unfortunately, the #1 reason for that is the mainstream media. They keep telling you that centrist corporate Democrats and Republicans are the center of the country. That is not true. We have absolute evidence that it isn't true. I've got a 5-point plan for a 5-year takeover, and we're trying to raise $55,000 today. So first of all, let's look at the thermometer. We started from the beginning of the day, not from the beginning of the show. And so far, we already have $3,987. Can I see $4,000?
Now, the 5-year plan, which is not something you ever want to call anything in American politics because 5-year plans are typically associated with authoritarian communist regimes, and they never work, has 5 pillars and requires the Young Turks audience to contribute $55,000 within the first day. But what are those 5 pillars? Well, I have a handy dandy screen grab right here to tell you. First of all, I clearly cannot ignore the headline of this 5-year plan, which is the 5-point palm exploding heart technique. But on to the pillars. Number 1, TYT. Number 2, Our Revolution. Number 3, Justice Democrats. Number 4, Cenk Pack, and number 5, Wolf Pack. I haven't seen anything less surprising than the 5 pillars of Cenk's 5-year plan in my entire life. Obviously, TYT was going to be first and foremost, as we discussed throughout this video. They're a company that's struggling financially, and their staff just unionized. Cenk begrudgingly recognized their staff's right to unionize. but the fact that there's 4 super PACs on this list is unbelievably hilarious. Because remember, Cenk Uygur is the guy who rails nonstop against Citizens United. He talks about how money in politics is immoral no matter who's doing it, but 4 of the 5 things that you have to give your money to are organizations that put more money into politics. But unlike typical super PACs, which Cenk himself would target as having a corrupting influence either on Washington politics or on politics at the state and local level, these PACs actually take it a step further. Remember, just as Democrats handpicks the candidates to run for office in these primaries, that's even more of a close relationship than other super PACs have with the candidates that they support, and it's borderline a campaign finance violation. And to make matters worse, after the candidates are hand-selected by people like Cenk Uygur, he then compounds the corruption by giving them basically unlimited free positive airtime on his online network. And they do this on air, on their network, right in front of your face as they complain about bias in the media and the corrupting influence that corporations have on our American politics, without any shame. And if you're thinking to yourself, Sean, I realize that you've proved without a shadow of a doubt that Cenk Uygur is an insane hypocrite, and he's clearly doing exactly what he's railing against, except 10 times worse. But at least he means well. He's putting forward progressive policies, and those help everyone. It's not like he's vengeful about it. Well, check out this tweet that he put out the same day that he announced his 5-year plan, where he talks about how when Democrats get into power, they should immediately cut off all funding from the federal government to red states until all the Republican governors turn around and beg the federal government for handouts. Now, that was in response to the Trump administration taking the correct position that the federal government should not bail out states for irresponsible financial decisions that they made prior to the pandemic just because of the pandemic. It's one thing to send federal money to supplement these state governments for lost revenue due to the crisis, but to bail out all these pensions and these bad contracts that the states negotiated and knew at the time when they negotiated them were bad deals that they weren't going to be able to pay, that absolutely should not happen. Also, it's very misleading to say that blue states are subsidizing red states because red states typically get more federal money than they pay in taxes, because a lot of that money goes into universities in the red states, which, by the way, as soon as Cenk Uygur wants to jump on board with cutting education spending, I'm right there with him. And the other thing that goes to is to military bases. And when you have a state like Kentucky and they have one military base like Fort Knox, which requires 10,000 soldiers and I think 2,300 personnel, plus all the equipment, all the food, everything that goes into running Fort Knox, you can see why having a couple of those big military bases in a state with a medium to small population will skew the numbers. But Cenk doesn't control for that because it doesn't fit his narrative. And if you're going to claim that there's no difference between having federal military personnel stationed in your state and your state receiving welfare from the federal government, then you're just not being honest. Needless to say, someone as vindictive and dishonest as Cenk Uygur should be nowhere near the halls of political power in this country. I'm glad he got 5% of the vote in his congressional run, and I hope his plan to prop up his company and prop up these super PACs so that they can corrupt politics completely backfires in his face. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And as always, if you like the video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, you can join my Discord, and a bunch of other stuff, support links, all that jazz in the description box of this video. Till next time.